Good evening once again, members, and good evening everybody that's joined us now on the YouTube. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee, 20th of January. We had an earlier part of the meeting, and I'll explain it to that there are items contained in the confidential which may or may not resort in legal action. So thank you for leaving and welcome back again. Firstly, can we do the normal housekeeping? I believe we ought to do the fire instructions.
Thank you, Chairman. There will be no fire drill tonight, and the fire alarm is allowed continuous ring. If the fire alarm rings, please leave the building promptly and calmly using the stairs next to the lift if possible. The fire escape in the council chamber should only be used as a last resort. Do not stop to gather personal belongings and do not use the lift. The evacuation point is at street level in the Knoll Road car park, and the assembly point is indicated by a green sign. Do not leave the assembly point until you are told it is safe to do so. Lastly, if you have reduced mobility and the fire alarm rings, please make yourself known to myself.
Thank you very much. Apologies. We have apologies from
Councillors Betton and Mansfield, and Councillor Morgan rises subbing for Councillor Betton.
Thank you. Minutes, we have agreed I will sign these at a convenient date to Mr. Scott and myself. Declarations we will deal with on each item, which takes us to the open part of the supplementary agenda, which is on the enforcement. I don't believe there are any need for declarations on this, but I will ask the question if there are. No. And Ms. Greenfield, to you, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. During the Planning Applications Committee in October, we explained that the planning enforcement team was going through a major overhaul. Since then, we have made significant progress. I would like to introduce you to Simon Shellcraft, who is our Contract Planning Enforcement Officer. Simon is helping out on the highest priority urgent investigations alongside Reno. I would also like to take the opportunity to introduce you to Bex Green, who is our Enforcement Stroke Compliance Officer. Bex has also been assisting with the highest priority urgent investigations, and as explained in our report, will switch to a more compliance stroke monitoring role from the beginning of the new financial year. We have undertaken a review of all our significant high priority investigations, and these have been redistributed between officers and are being moved forward accordingly. So reporting for the period of the 1st of September until the 31st of December, during the period of time we received 72 new referrals, 19 cases were closed as no breach were identified, 8 were resolved without the need for further action, 5 cases were closed as not expedient to pursue, and during this period we've issued 6 formal notices, which include 4 enforcement notices for 1 to 23 St George's Court, Greylands, Windlesham Road, Chobham, Hall Grove Farm Industrial Estate in Bagshot, and 19 Bedford Avenue in Frimley Green. 6 retrospective planning applications were received and 33 cases remain ongoing. We have now mapped out our internal procedures dealing with enforcement investigations. This forms part of bringing the team's IT system called Uniform up to date, and also as part of the installation of Enterprise. The system will help the council monitor officers' caseloads. I'm now going to hand you over to Reno for an update of the installation of Enterprise and the associated work which was completed this week. Reno.
Thank you, Julia, and good evening, members. During the Planning Applications Committee meeting in October last year, I advised that we were working alongside our IT department to install this Enterprise program, which is an add-on program to Uniform, our IT system. This program provides the facility to interrogate the information stored within Uniform in a much more friendlier way, giving managers the ability to see caseloads of officers and also the overall team in a much clearer picture. I can advise that after 5 continuous grueling days of hard work, Enterprise was finally installed on Tuesday of this week. I would like to take this opportunity to thank IT for their hard work in, first of all, making this possible, but also helping me getting through and understanding the processes alongside this IT system so that I can help our team get on using it in the very near future. Unfortunately, due to the short period of time of its installation and today's meeting, we were unable to incorporate some of the graphs in today's presentation. I would, however, like to give you assurance that these graphs will be incorporated into the next Planning Applications Committee meeting. Thank you very much. And I hand you back to Julia.
Thank you, Reno. Does anybody have any questions you would like to ask myself or the team?
Councillor Allaway.
Yeah, if I could just pose the same question about the 5 non-expedients to pursue.
I haven't got the details of the 5 particular cases, but I can come back to you with the 5 cases and the reasons behind the non-expedient.
Okay, thank you. And just a question about the new compliance officer role. So how is that planned to be executed? I.e., what we have in front of us as cases are probably historical ones that members of the public have reported, and now we're aiming to monitor granted applications with conditions to make sure they're complied with. So could you explain how that's going to proceed?
To be honest, it's work in progress. We have been concentrating, as you can see, we've got additional resource now. You know from the previous committees that we've got a high number of historical cases which we have concentrated our efforts, or we've concentrated Bex's efforts on helping us to try and reduce the numbers. And then we'll be working with Gavin and John in planning, with coming up with a procedure of how the planning team and the enforcement team can work closer together regarding the compliance role and the monitoring of conditions, which will obviously have to be a risk-based approach because we just simply don't have enough officers to go around on each individual case. But again, I can come back to you once we've mapped out our process for that. Any more questions?
No? Okay, thank you very much indeed to the enforcement team, who I believe are leaving us now, unfortunately. We'd love to see you stay on, but... Thank you very much indeed for your input and work. And welcome to the new members of the team as well. Right, thank you, members. On to item, I can see everybody now. Item 2, page 9 on the main agenda, Elwood Manor, London Road, Windlesham. Are there any declarations to make on this one? Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you so much for reminding me. You could tell that we have discussed this. Yes, just to make everybody aware that along with a number of other councillors, excluding yourself, because you weren't invited, we spent a period of time on site with the applicant, reviewing the existing buildings and discussing their plans. So they basically engaged with myself and with members of the Windlesham Parish Council and the other ward members for Windlesham, Chobham and Windlesham. Obviously, I come to the meeting with an open mind.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention I wasn't invited. Any other declarations on this item? No? Mr. Gavin, and welcome to you. This is your first appearance in front of us, I believe. Welcome, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks. Can I first draw people's attention to the update? That mainly relates to changes to conditions which are largely aimed at changing triggers to enable the applicant the developer to start on site as soon as possible while safeguarding planning issues. I could go through those if you like. Yeah, please. So on condition 3, which relates to materials, that has been changed to be more specific in terms of our requirements, and the requirements relate to the new building, the new main building, which is the collaboration hub, and alterations to the Manor House. The other alterations are simply covered by approved drawings which specify that materials will match existing. Condition 8, archaeology, that was initially a pre-commencement condition requiring no development until a document had been submitted and approved. The applicant has since liaised with Surrey County Council Archaeology, submitted a document which the County Council are happy with, so that is now simply a compliance condition. They simply implement in accordance with the approved document. Condition 18 on woodland management. After discussions with the arboricultural officer, it was felt that that wasn't actually required. Sorry. On condition 8, which required a woodland management plan, again pre-commencement, discussions took place with the tree officer, and taking account of the limited amount of woodland on the site, as opposed to areas of trees, it was decided that that wasn't necessary. It couldn't be justified, so that is deleted. Condition 19, lighting, that was initially one condition, a pre-commencement condition. That has now been split into 2 conditions. One, a lighting condition for the operational phase when the building is occupied and in use. So that is prior to occupation rather than pre-commencement. And then to cover lighting issues during demolition works, we have a separate condition to require details of how lighting will be managed to protect biodiversity and so on during demolition and construction phases. And similarly, for the same reason, we have an additional tree protection condition that is specifically aimed at tree protection during demolition and construction phases. Yeah, is that okay? So in terms of the scheme, the site as existing there, it's 11.11 hectares, give or take. It's north of the settlement boundary, as you can see, of Windlesham. It's in the green belt. It was previously occupied by Eli Lilly, who vacated the site. The site is currently vacant. So UCB, the applicant, a global pharmaceutical company, they wish to now relocate to this site from their existing Slough premises. So the main element of the scheme, as you can see, the main buildings A, B, C and D are centrally located within the site, and the main additional building is what is annotated building H there between buildings C and D. That is the principal new building. It is called the Collaboration Hub. Sited centrally within the existing complex of buildings and partly on the footprint of an existing building between buildings C and D, which would be demolished. So The building would add approximately 1,500 square metres additional floor space over the existing floor space of the existing campus. There would be no change of use of the buildings at the site. Eli Lilly were a research and development company, as are UCB. And in terms of the appearance of that collaboration hub, I have some elevations. As you can see, it's a bespoke, original, innovative building. It's primarily of timber in an aluminium frame, robust, good quality materials, and the final details of those are safeguarded by the materials condition that I just mentioned in the updates. So they're the side elevations. They are the rear and front elevations. The bottom elevation is the entrance elevation. Floor plans, as you can see, that illustrates it's a very well thought through original design solution. The building is also, it's over 3 stories, but it is set down into the ground such that the height aligns with the existing surrounding buildings, and those sections, they are sections from the eastern approach to the building. That just illustrates adjoining buildings surrounding, enclosing the collaboration hub are generally aligned at the same height. So that is a view on the approach to that central area. So the collaboration hub would essentially occupy that area behind the trees and behind those containers. So as you can see again, it's very wholly enclosed by and surrounded by existing buildings. There's some images illustrating what it will look like. The other main change is, the other main element of the application is alterations to the Manor house shown there. It's not listed, but it's a house from 1810. It has considerable heritage value, and the aim there is that on the southern and western sides, a new terrace will be created. So that's the western elevation existing at the top, proposed at the bottom, and this is the new terrace to be created, and new openings, windows, doors opening out onto that terrace, and that terrace gives views onto the landscape grounds, and the intention is it gives an attractive employee experience, and employees can interact with their rural surroundings. That's the southern elevation around the corner. Again, existing elevation at the top, proposed at the bottom, showing the terrace on that side. And just the floor plans. That's the existing floor plan of the Manor house. And as you see here, this is where the new terrace would be added. Other than that, the principal element of the scheme, other than various alterations to facades of the other buildings, is a significant enhancement in landscaping of the site. Those light green and dark green areas are additional planting with the aim of producing a more attractive approach to the hub, a green setting to the hub at the entrance end, and generally enhancing biodiversity across the site as well. So just to conclude, that is an aerial image of the campus of buildings as it stands. This building here would be demolished and the hub would infill that area, as you see there. And if you view the existing site in terms of landscaping there, you can see that the planting, additional planting and landscaping would greatly enhance the setting of the building and the biodiversity value of the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm fascinated by the look of the hub. Councillor White.
Thank you for that presentation. Sorry? Thank you for that presentation. I normally don't like modern buildings. I'm a little bit against things like this, but I think this looks and works quite well. It would only be visible from the air, and it looks quite presentable. But on the other hand, the Manor House, you say it's not locally listed, and I don't know if this is a planning thing, but I'll just put it out there. Would it be up to the owners to apply for it to be locally listed, or can it be put forward by members of the public to be locally listed, and can that be done so that we can keep some heritage on the site?
Yes, so anyone can put it forward for listing, local listing, and I believe there is a current exercise ongoing with the council that have been inviting suggestions for local listing. I believe that's ongoing.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. This is actually a new one that's come up as a result of the removal of the woodland management plan. And that is that on 17, page 24, it says that the planting of any tree or shrub shown on the approved landscaping plan. We don't have a detailed landscaping plan with these documents. We've obviously got the aerial photograph of where they're thinking of putting it, but we haven't got the detailed landscaping plan. So the reason I'm concerned is that there are some very stunning specimen trees on that site, and without visibility of the detailed landscaping plan, the condition that it relates to is a little bit difficult, really, to understand whether or not that goes far enough. And do we have the detailed landscaping plan is question number one.
We do have detailed landscaping plans.
Okay. Is it possible to check, please, that all of those specimen trees are protected on that detailed landscaping plan?
One of the conditions, they aren't allowed, as the condition stands, works beyond demolition can't continue unless they have submitted an arboricultural method statement, tree protection plan, and a general landscaping plan. So that would be, when they come in with those details, the arboricultural officer will be checking that all specimens of value are protected and retained. And that landscaping scheme also covers areas where the arboricultural officer wasn't quite happy with the mix of species, and that their submission pursuant to that landscaping condition will be scrutinised as to both retention of what needs to be retained and enhancement with appropriate new species.
I just wonder if we could possibly look at the wording then, because on 17, page 24, it refers to shown on the approved landscaping plan, whereas from what you're saying, there is still some work to be done on that landscaping plan. So I'm just raising concern about the wording. It's not a major thing, but do we need to look at an alteration of that wording if there is still a landscaping plan to come forward? If not, if we're absolutely happy with it, that's fine. But the statement and the officer's report very slightly seem to contradict one another.
Yes, Council, we'll take that away and we'll look into the wording of that. If the detail's not been submitted in accordance with what you're saying, we will look into that and get the condition amended accordingly.
Yes, can I just come in here, because it's saying that condition 18 has been deleted, accepting the strategies and other bits, but I do question, I think, Councillor Wheeler, this is where you're coming from, as to whether or not that it is appropriate at this stage, at least, for that clause to be deleted, and whether that should remain. Yeah?
Or potentially if that clause should remain until there is an alternative or a detailed plan, or alternatively, if the wording for 17 on that condition, which makes reference to the fact planting of any tree or shrub shown on the approved landscaping plan, if we're still waiting for further refinements to come in on that landscaping plan, we just need to say that any planting or any tree or shrub on the approved landscaping plan, rather than shown on the approved landscaping plan, if we're still waiting for further details. Really pernickety, for which I only marginally apologise. But either we've got the final plan, including all of the TPO stuff on it, or we haven't. And from what I'm hearing, we haven't quite got the final landscaping plan.
I think the wording of it's condition 17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the bottom of condition 17.
Sorry, the bottom of condition 17.
So the wording is the date of planting of any tree or shrub shown on the approved landscaping plan, which would infer that we are referring to an approved landscaping plan. I've got page 24.
Page 24, clause condition 17.
Just below E. I've obviously got a very special version then, because I'm reading it out
Well,
as stated.
Don't tempt me.
You're just doing it to confuse me, aren't you? Yeah, that one there. Tree or shrub shown on the approved landscaping plan.
I mean, what we could do there is say, or a variation to. Yeah.
Right, can we put that in as an amendment to that condition? Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say how pleased I am, and I'm sure many other members are as well, that this company has chosen to choose a site in our borough for such a lovely development, which I'm sure will add to the quality of the local housing or building stock, but also act as presumably a source of extra employment and what have you. So we should do everything possible to encourage and support their endeavours here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to refer to a number of items here which are all interlinked. First of all, paragraph 7.5.4 on page 15. And for the sake of clarity, I'm referring to the second paragraph, 7.5.4, not the first paragraph, 7.5.4. And to also paragraph 7.7.7 on page 18, to our condition 10 on page 22, and also Surrey County Council's condition 4 on page 30. These are all interrelated. Let's go back to the first one, 7.5.4. It relates here to the provision of electric vehicle charging points, and in the very first line there is a reference to 20% passive provision. This word passive is also used in paragraph 7.7.7. I've never come across the definition, designation of passive in terms of electric vehicle provision. First of all, can I ask, what does passive mean in this sense?
passive provision means that essentially the wiring to enable an electric vehicle charging point to be hooked up is inserted. That infrastructure is there. It's not actually used at that point. That's why it's called passive. But it means that in the future, where if and when demand increases, then it's easy for an additional EV point to be established.
Thank you for that
Sorry,
clarification.
can I
That
just
makes
come
it-
in for clarity on that one? Funny enough, I hadn't quite written your name on this clause, but I knew you were coming up. Can you just, therefore, the final sentence there is talking about the car park management plan should address future additional provision to meet demand. That links back onto that passive nature, does it?
That's the mechanism.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Councillor Tapper.
Thank you,
Please
Chair.
carry.
Yes, okay, so that car parking management plan is not in addition to the installation of either installed chargers or the provision for the ability in future. It's not over and above that, as I read what you've just said. The second point is relating to the term fast. If we then go on to our condition 10 on page 22, we then refer not to fast but to rapid. Just for clarity, these are two different types of chargers. Fast chargers are AC chargers rated at either 7, 11 or 22 kilowatts. Rapid chargers are DC chargers rated at 50 kilowatts or above. If we look on to the Surrey County Council condition 4, it's quite clear here that what we're saying here is that there should be a minimum requirement of 7 kilowatt Mode 3 Type 2 connector chargers. These are fast chargers, they're not rapid chargers. I would like to be able to think that we give permission to the new occupiers of this site to install rapid chargers if they feel it appropriate to do so at some time in the future. It would be nice, particularly as newer electric vehicles are now capable of charging at up to rates of up to 350 kilowatts. Trying to charge them at 7 kilowatts is sluggish, I think would be the right term. So it would be nice for us to be able to encourage them to install rapid chargers in the future, if not straight away. Maybe just one, I don't know. But it's just a suggestion. Electric vehicle charging is rapidly developing these days. New batteries, new capabilities, and it would be nice to think that we will provide for those new vehicles in our recommendations to the owners. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. You lost me halfway through that, but quite candidly. Councillor Wheeler.
I think the most important point here is that we need to be consistent across the conditions, because otherwise I should imagine that if enforcement was still with us, they would say that it's very difficult to enforce if there is inconsistency. So whatever the final decision is, and maybe Councillor Tapper would be happy for that to be the final wording of it, to be agreed between the officers, the chair, the vice chair and the ward councillors, but that maybe we can say subject to a consistency of conditions across those various conditions, which I'm sure you've captured. Thank you, Councillor Tapper, for sharing the wisdom that you have in this particular area. I am sure that by the end of this term, we will all be much better informed. But that would be my suggestion at this point, because I think if we try and sort it out here and now, it's going to be a little bit confusing for all of us, but we do need consistency.
So just for clarity, we're saying that these conditions and the clauses outlined by Councillor Tapper should all be brought together to ensure that there is consistency within these. Because to me, in my untutored eye, there does look to be a slight variance on these, but I got lost on rapid and snail pace and things like that. But yeah, I think that's a condition on that.
Councillor Tapper, can we just clarify the conditions? Because condition 10 refers to passive and active rapid charging vehicle points, but then you referred to condition 4, did you not, as well?
Sorry, yes. Condition 4 in the Surrey County Council document. Yes, 10 is, condition 10 needs to be changed from rapid to fast. We're not asking for rapid, it needs to be made fast chargers. I now understand the situation with regard to passive. Thank you for clarifying that. And yes, the reference to condition 4 of the Surrey County Council is really the section there which confirms that we're talking about fast chargers, not rapid chargers. That's the consistency that needs to be brought across. The paragraph numbering also needs to be addressed as well. We should not have two 7.5.4s.
Yeah, it's because it's a different document and from the county from on high.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. Councillor White.
At the risk of sounding flippant, the next thing on there is number 11 is to do with the 90 cycle parking spaces. Are there going to be e-bike charging points as well?
We haven't got that requirement in there at the moment.
I think informative. I feel informative coming on. Yes, I'm getting nods. There should be an informative based on that these should make provision as appropriate for e-charge, e-cycles. Right? You happy with that? No, Councillor Tapper, not yet. I'm still suffering from the previous one. Councillor Rise.
Thank you. I don't know if you're going to enjoy. It's the question regarding rapid and fast, and if the agreement is for fast charging points, does that then prevent them putting in rapid points? Because if they want to add rapid, which is, from my understanding of what Councillor Tapper has said, rapid is better, but the agreement is fast. But if they then want to add rapid, would they have to? Can we enable them to install rapid? But if they put in fast, that's also an agreement that is the correct thing they can do.
Yeah, that will. I think it's a fair point. Yes, that will get tied up when the officers look at putting together those different clauses, and we're all feeling. Well, most of us are feeling our way on this, and some are ahead of others. Councillor Tapper, you wanted to come back in.
Yes, I just wanted to pick up on what was said about electric cycles. Yes, I perfectly agree with that. That provision should be made, but it generally only requires an outdoor 13-amp socket or a 16-amp commando socket, as long as it's weatherproof. That's usually the charging lead that's provided with electric cycles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know what we'd do without you, to be honest. No, stop it. Members, have anybody other points other than electric charging points, please? Councillor White.
No, I'd just like to say, if that's all we're worried about on the site, then it can't be a bad application.
I think it's a very fair point, and I'm delighted to see this application, and I'm pleased that nobody's made any comment about how pleased we are that the company must be moving to here from Slough. Made famous by the late Terry Wogan, I believe. But if there's nothing else we have... Oh, can I just say one thing? You will have noted on the update, there is an informative that has come in here, an additional informative, condition 9 travel plan, and it is an informative. The applicant has requested to consider inclusion of a station-to-site shuttle bus for transporting employees, and that is an informative that's come in here on the updates. So we have a recommendation with amendments which will be dealt with the wording agreed by the chairman, with the officers chairman, vice chairman and ward councillors. Is there a proposer and a seconder for this, please? Councillor Perry, Councillor Wheeler, all those in favour. Do we need to have a... that's unanimous, Mr. Scott. I believe it is unanimous. Yes, yes. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much indeed to you and for this, and welcome to Surrey Heath, I think the best thing to say. Feel free to stay, or you may leave if you wish. But thank you very much for your attendance. Right, members. Item 3 on page 41. I beg your pardon. Yes, it is. Item 3, page 41, 1 middle close. Now, there are situation has arisen here, which I'll come on to in a moment, but we have had a series of site visits on this one, but there was only one site visit that was conducted under the current rules. I emphasize the current rules, where the committee has to ask for a site visit, and only those members attending that site visit are able to vote on the final outcome of the application. And I'd like to come back to that at the end of the meeting. For clarity, here the 3 members who can speak on the item but are unable to vote are councillors Whitcroft, Morley and Black. All other councillors here are able to vote. And I say I will come back to that item at the end of this meeting. On declarations, as I say, there have been various site visits, and I think it's fair to say there's been extensive correspondence from neighbours, and I know I have met with adjoining occupiers. Any other declarations to make? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have also engaged with the residents on either side of this particular development in terms of listening to their concerns and discussing them with them. I have, however, retained the ability to have an open mind on the final proposal that is before us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. Yes, I too have come to this meeting with an open mind. Councillor Wheeler, do I see?
Yeah, I just think probably that all of us need to declare. I think all of us have received direct email communication from everyone concerned. So it's probably a general declaration for all of us, Chair.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kimber, over to you, please.
So, number 1 Middle Close. This application has been decided by the Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Hawkins. There's been 2 updates. Since writing the committee report, a further 5 representations have been received from 4 addresses and are included in the update sheet. And secondly, the wording of condition 1 has been amended, and this is also in the update sheet. So, to give a little background to the application, in August of 2019, extensions and alterations were approved. This development included increasing the height of the dwelling, a 2-storey side extension, single-storey front extension, rear dormer windows, and alterations to the fenestration. In November of 2019, amendments to the initial permission were granted. Both of these permissions are extant. This is a householder application sought retrospectively for extensions and alterations. It is an amendment to permission 19/0701. The main difference between the current development and the previous application is a reduction in the height of the dwelling by 0.2 metres, increase in the height of the 2 approved gables to the front, these 2 here, by 0.6 metres, the installation of 5 heating and cooling units, which are 3 along here, 1 at the back and 1 at the side. They're all entirely within the application site. The removal of the infill extension to the side and rear, so that would have been here, and alterations to the approved rear dormers and fenestration. So these are the as-built floor plans. The retained stagger in the eastern side elevation is shown here and again here, and the increased gables to the front increase the headroom for these spaces on the 2nd floor. So these plans show the front elevation of the dwelling. The top plan shows the extant permission and the bottom plan shows the as-built dwelling. You can see the increase in the height of the gables here and the relocation of roof lights to accommodate that amendment. The level of overlooking is not considered to be significantly altered by this amendment. So from the left to right, we have images from the front of the dwelling as built from within the site. We have the front of the as built taken from the street scene, and we have the dwelling prior to the replacement roof being built. It is the increase in height of these gables at the front which is being assessed by this application, and it is not considered that they have a significant adverse impact on the street scene compared to the approved scheme. These plans show the approved dwelling at the top and the as-built dwelling at the bottom. As you can see, the staggered side elevation has been retained rather than infilling the area as was originally proposed and approved. There's also one heating and cooling unit to this side elevation, and the overall reduction in height and the increase to the height of the front gables is also seen. So this image is taken from the rear garden of 56 Roundway. This dwelling and the application site have a rear to side relationship. The stagger in this elevation has been retained as shown here, and the increased height to the front gable is also seen. The heating and cooling unit is not visible from this view. These plans show the extant permission at the top and the as-built below. The white section in the extant permission shows the dwelling as it was prior to the extensions approved in 2019. The extensions around this all have extant permission. The alterations to be considered on the rear are the increased width to the dormer structures and the reduction of the glazing within each structure, as well as the heating and cooling unit here, and then you can also see the ones to the sides there and there. So that's an image of the as-built rear elevation. Some elements of the development are still proposed, for example, the Juliet balcony that will be going across those windows. So again, you've got the extant at the top, your as-built development below. Following comments made by Environmental Health and the noise survey submitted with this application, the plans have been annotated to show the acoustic coverings to the units closest to the 3 middle close. Subject to these coverings being applied and maintained, there will be no adverse noise impact on the occupiers of this neighbouring property. The elevation also shows the increased height to the front gable. Due to the separation distance between this feature and number 3 middle close, it will not result in an adverse impact. So the two images below show the as-built western elevation. The heating and cooling units on the side here did not form part of the previous approval. The 2-storey side extension did. The image on the right shows the access route to the rear of the application site. Access to the heating and cooling units is granted via this route and is entirely within the control of number 1 middle close. These images show other dwellings within middle close, namely 3, 5, 7 and 8. And the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 3 public speakers, and I can see them all on the screen. Can I just say to the speakers, you have 4 minutes to address the committee. You will be advised when there is 1 minute remaining, and if you can stay on to take any questions of a planning nature from the committee, it'd be appreciated. And Mr. Naseby, I think you are first on my list, and the time will start whenever you're ready. So over to you, please. You're muted, Mr. Naseby. Right, that looks to be it. No, if you start.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Sorry, there's no
Right, that looks to be it.
I'm sorry.
Right, you're now live, Mr. Naseby. If you could start when you're ready, please.
Good evening. Our house in Ramway backs onto one middle close at 90 degrees, and we cannot avoid seeing the profile of the overdevelopment every time we look out of our windows and when we're in the garden. It is disconcerting to read the case officer's report contradicting objections from ourselves and neighbours using the various building regulation guidelines. The same guidelines that can equally be used to justify our valid objections. We have yet to meet a local resident who thinks the alterations to the original house are acceptable. It does not conform to the ambience and nature of Copt Hall or general form of the houses in the locality. The increased height of the front gables and size of the dormer windows, contrary to the case officer's report, in our opinion, do impact on our visual amenity and are overbearing and intrusive. Both could have been corrected if planning enforcement had responded to the reports over the excess overbuild during 2020. As the wildlife protection condition involved areas of the rear garden, surely they should also have been subject to inspection. Instead, the developer was allowed to blatantly ignore the condition, even though it is an integral aspect of the approved plan. The latest garden plan is wrong. The wall extends further up to the boundary of number 3. It is still unfinished and is not built up to the original height along our boundary. Its suitability to prevent a significant landslide down the hazardous 3-meter vertical drop created by the excavations is questionable. Qualifying failure to observe the wildlife condition that the greenery was comprised is mistaken. It was not. Photos supporting the original application, plus those provided by my wife, clearly show the extent of the greenery. The approved plans and subsequent plans show 1 and 3 middle close in parallel. Surely any slight variation is not as excessive as shown on the latest submitted plan. We wonder why has it been necessary at this late stage to suddenly adjust the plan. Lack of control of the approved plans until the involvement of the committee is scandalous. We appreciate all the interest the committee has shown and grateful you have given so much of your time in considering the problems created by the construction. Contrary to the approved plans, we are thankful at last month's meeting, your consideration of the air-conditioned noise pollution.
You've got 1 minute left, Mr. Naseby.
Plus unease over inadequate plan details resulted in a refusal decision. We chose to live in Copt Hall because of the pleasant open nature. We did not expect, after 46 years, to be faced with looking at such an obtrusive building, and the oppressive appearance is having a detrimental effect on our lives, health, and well-being. We look forward to closure of the nightmare and hope that you agree what has been built is both inappropriate and unacceptable, and do not approve the current plan 200514. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Naseby. Now, members, are there any questions of a planning nature for the speaker? No. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Naseby. If you could mute yourself, and I'll go to Mr. Craig. And again, the same 4-minute rule, Mr. Craig, whenever you're ready.
Thank you for affording me the opportunity to speak at this meeting. Firstly, I'd like to say that I'm not opposed to homeowners or developers carrying out home improvements or even large extensions, as long as they are in keeping with the locality and do not have a detrimental effect on the existing residents. The reason I'm here today is to not only object to the heat exchanges and drainage, but to hopefully highlight to the members of this committee and the planning department the long-lasting effect your decisions have on the neighbours and other residents of such developments. The heat exchangers are not only an eyesore, but also a potential hazard to the welfare of my 83-year-old mother-in-law, as one of them is directly opposite an air vent above her bedroom. A noise survey was carried out, which had the receiver at the rear of the property. This did not take into account the front ground floor bedroom, which is actually the closest receptor to the heat exchangers. The survey was very biased in favour of the developer, as at no stage were we approached to give our concerns. We would have been more than happy for them to use our roof. I'd also like to address the very laughable suggestion that boxes around them will prevent noise. Who is going to enforce this? As let's be honest, if the planners enforcement had done their job properly in the first place, we may not be here now. Our concern is the noise that these create will be slightly irritating at best, but more likely an absolute nuisance, which will keep us awake. Our main concern with this long-term effects of the heat exchangers not being maintained. If you allow them to stay, you will in the future likely be causing a neighbourhood dispute, as we will no doubt have to go to the Environment and Health Department to get them to deal with the homeowner, whoever that may be in the future. Having just come from a holiday let, which was only built a year ago, these units are very noisy. As those of you may have noticed when you attended my address, we have spent a lot of time on our garden, which has been our pride and joy. Due to the unsightliness of the heat exchangers and the amount of them that has been fitted, we no longer spend as much time out there as we used to. When we had the house on the market, it was raised by several viewers how awful they looked and put them off making an offer. The heat exchangers have to be a minimum of 1 metre from the neighbouring boundary, as pointed out on the visit. This is not the case. I seem to spend a lot of my very valuable time repeating myself with no response from the people paid to do so. How is this still being allowed? I want to bring your attention to the drainage issue and now very large driveway that has been added to the property. It was stated in an earlier application that the water would flow into a soakaway and not over my premises or the road. I can tell you now that this is not the case, as the water when it rains, even a small amount flows over my driveway. We have raised this with the building control, who have told us it's a landscaping issue, and we will have to take out a civil case against the developer. How can this be allowed to be the case when the development has not been completed and part of the planning application was the drainage? The driveway, which has been added, is well over 5 metres square, which from research should have planning permission for. I will leave that to the planners to address or just ignore, as they keep doing, which would not surprise me. This development has had a detrimental effect on our mental health, as we have had to put up with noise from banging and drilling. I watched one of these meetings
Just
not so
under
long
1
ago
minute left.
and was disappointed by the lack of compassion from one of the members when they stated that builders can't wait to finish early, so putting time restrictions would not be an issue. If only life was that simple. We have had to put up with noise well past 6 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning. This is when the law, as this was a development and not a DIY project. I would ask that if such a development comes before a planning department in the future, they have some regard for the neighbours. We've been extremely let down by the planners who did not take our concerns into account when asking for my decision. I will, as I seem to keep doing, refer you to Article 8 of the Human Rights Act. For those of you who are not aware of this, refers to a right for a private and family life, and more importantly, to be comfortable in your own home. When my father-in-law was on his deathbed, we had to put up with banging that was loud, that we could not hear, and the paramedics were saying, I will leave that you all to think about that. 4 minutes is enough, to be honest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. Members, do you have any questions for the speaker? Ms. Kimber, I have one question. Can you put up it was the plan that showed the heat exchange units on the side boundary? Yeah, you had a side one on. Yeah, that one. Mr. Craig, I don't know if you can see what I'm looking at here, but they've got and you know one of the conditions on the application, but on the side there, I can't pick up the boundary of the joint boundary. To service those units, will they need to come onto your property, or will they be able, in your opinion, this is your only opinion, will they be able to service them from the property's own, within the boundary of the existing property? May I get it out? Thank you.
Yeah, they will be able to service them from within the boundary of their own property. But as I pointed out in my thing, they are less than a metre from the boundary, which by law, they have to be more than a metre away.
Thank you for that. Members, anything else? Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, do you have a citation for which law this contravenes the 1 metre?
I saw it on the BBC News. I did highlight it in one of my previous planning objections.
Mr. Robinson, the environmental officer, will be coming on, and we will ask him that question when we finish the speakers. Thank you. So if you remember that, you can come back on that one, please. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Craig. And sorry, Councillor Wheeler, I missed you there.
So easily done. I am not sure where the disagreement came from in relation to the block plan and the orientation between number 1 and number 3, and the statement that that isn't correct. But if it is from the speaker, I wonder if they could elaborate slightly on that, please.
It wasn't from myself, it was from Mr. Naseby. It has been massively overstated, the direction our property is facing, but we've had very minimal contact with Ms. Kimber on that and been told that we have to go with what the actual plans were. The issue we take with that is that this has only suddenly become a thing with this latest plan with the heat exchangers. Again, because of probably the fact that they're too close to the boundary.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Craig. And now, Mr. Peacock, please.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for your time. Thank you for letting me speak on behalf of the applicant, in which I've been asked to do so. Firstly, I just want to go over the scheme as previously specified by Ms. Kimber. There were 2 previous applications which were approved. This is a resubmission to just look over some inconsistencies in the final build, which have been compared with those previously approved plans. To specify this again, the changes that have been made through these plans are the removal of the infill extension, the reduction of the height, the increase of the gable height, the implementation of the heating and the cooling units, and some fenestration changes. It's crucial from the applicant's position and the position of the council that these amendments have to be viewed in line with the previous permission that was approved. And that's an imperative component of this case, which we wish to address and we wish to remind the council of now. When the application was previously put to committee on the 9th of December, there were 2 reasons for refusal. These suggested reasons will now be addressed now by myself. Firstly, it was the lack of a noise report and the implementation of these heating and cooling units and what impact this would have on neighbouring amenity. An external noise report has now been provided by Nova Acoustics, which confirmed that with the mitigations that have been happy to place and that the applicant is happy to comply with via condition, it is both the professional opinion of Nova Acoustics and signed off by the environmental health officer by the council that there'll be no impact on amenity in regard to noise. We ask that the evidence and the assessment from these qualified professionals is viewed and advised upon. The second reason for refusal was in regard to the plans and that the plans were inaccurate and they did not assess the true final construction. New plans have now been submitted and then therefore the impact on character can truly be assessed. As elaborated on Ms. Kimber before in her presentation, comparisons between what was previously approved on all of the elevations were shown and also what is now proposed. In regard to the front elevation, the height of the gables has been increased, but the ridge height has been decreased. This reduction in ridge height has positive implications from the street scene, as seen by the screening to the front of the proposal. Dwelling is now less visible than it was before. The changes on both side elevations are minor in nature, including the removal of an infill extension, and as confirmed by Nova Acoustics and the local planning authority, there's going to be no noise implications in regard to amenity. On the rear elevation, the only major change is the increase in the width of the dormers. However, the dormers still comply with principle 10.5 of the Surrey Heath Design Guide in terms of subservience set in from the sides, and they also do not occupy more than half the width and depth of the roof slope. Therefore, these dormers are still compliant with policy. In addition, the amount of glazed and window space has been reduced to ensure that there's no increased impact on privacy and overlooking in terms of these dormers. Therefore, these changes that have been made are all minor in detail and have no adverse impact on character, amenity, size, scale, over and above what was previously approved at the site in this situation. Just to quickly respond to a few of the objections made today and online. In sense of the gables and the height of the gables, in terms of overlooking, I do wish to specify now that opposite the dwelling, there is no dwelling on the other side of the road. Therefore, the height of the glass features on the front elevation will have no impact of overlooking into someone else's property. And as shown by the screening in front of the property, one middle close and also on the opposite side of the road. So that significantly reduces the impacts of these factors. In terms of drainage, during construction, there's always going to be more runoff in the build, which will then slowly reduce over time due to topography, as also alluded to by Mr. Craig. There are situations where one middle house is always raised above. There's always going to be a slight impact of runoff. The previous driveway sloped left to right. This has now been rearranged to ensure that the runoff is directed into a drainage channel that is erected to the front of the property. This then flows into a soakaway. The driveway
That is
there.
your time up, Mr. Peacock.
Thank you, Mr. Peacock. Your time is up now. Can you stay there, Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you. I just wonder if the Speaker could confirm, please, the distance between the edge of the unit and the boundary with a neighbouring property.
Yes, so the gap between the two properties is more than 1 metre, but the distance between the edge of the units and the boundary is, I believe, less than 0.5, 0.4 metres.
Sorry, say it again. You said that the gap between the properties was 1 metre, but then you said the gap between the units and the property was 1.4 metres. I'm sorry, you may not have heard you very clearly there.
Yes. So the gap between the two properties is 1 metre, but when you look from the units that extend out, they obviously take up some of that gap, and then there's circa 0.5, 0.4 metres left. These units are also elevated above the walkway as well, which, as seen from the photos shown by Mrs. Kimber as well, which means that they can be tended to, they can be maintained from the short access and separation between the properties.
Thank you. Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd just like to ask the Speaker regarding on the western elevation where you have the 3 units. The first unit, which is at the frontage of the application of the dwelling, which on the site is identified as a garage. And I'm just wondering what the requirement for a heating unit for a garage is.
Yep. The requirement for the heating for the garage is apologies. Simply to provide heat for that facility. I don't know the exact dynamics and ins and outs of which individual heater is provided for each section of the house and the dwelling and vice versa. All I can say and emphasize now is that the location of these heaters was checked by Nova Acoustics, and also the LPA have looked at these and considered this, and that the mitigations that are proposed are sufficient in the views of the professionals to mitigating the risks that these have.
Sorry, Councillor Rice, do you want to?
I do. I'm sorry, Mr. Peacock. I'm not asking about the mitigation. I think that's been addressed by others. What I'm asking is, why a heating unit is being required for a garage when it doesn't. You don't often need to heat your car. And my concern is that that designation as a garage is later then going to be turned into a living space within the dwelling. And I'm trying to get if that is the intention of the applicant.
Of course, perfectly understand that. That is not the intention of the applicant at all. I don't think they have any aspirations to convert, as we've already seen as well, shown by Mrs. Kimber, that there has been a substantial amount of extensions, and the applicant is happy with what's proposed now and the size of the dwelling, and it's perfectly a livable space and acceptable space. There's no need to convert the garage, and the applicant would be happy to comply with any restrictions of this and vice versa moving forward.
Mr. Peacock, on that same elevation, when we were on site, right up at the eaves, there looked to be a circular hole right up at the eaves. Can you say what the intention is to place there?
I cannot, I'm afraid. I do not have the answer to that question at this stage. But all I know is that there's no intention for the applicant to place any further built form, wires, vice versa, anything on this elevation. All they seek to do is to provide the mitigation measures around the units, and that is all on that elevation. I mean, they don't want to provide anything else. They don't want to provide any visual deficits on that side. So that's all I can say in response to that point. In regards to building regulations and such moving forward, I'm sure the applicant would be happy to confirm why there's a hole there and vice versa.
Thank you. Councillor Rice, did you want to come back?
I do. It's a question for officers. That very point was raised to officers at the site visit.
So can we do that when we finish with the speakers? Yeah, but hold that one and we come back onto that. Members, do you have any other questions for the speaker? Councillor Allaway.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to ask if there's any reason why those air conditioning units can't be floor mounted.
I think the reason for them being up there is so, one, that they can be accessed and they can be maintained efficiently, just to ensure that there's no impact moving forward. I mean, one of the major concerns is of the applicant that they want to be able to address all of those factors and maintain those units to ensure that there is no impact on noise moving forward, as that's one of the crucial aspects and one of the crucial components of those heating and cooling units. They're raised up in the air at that level so they can be maintained and addressed to, and also so that there is going to be no implication on noise moving forward, as per the conclusions of the submitted evidence.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Peacock. Now, right. Councillor Rice had a question for the officers. Mr. Robinson is online, and I know Councillor Lewis had a question. Can we go to Mr. Robinson for Councillor Lewis to ask a question, please? Councillor Lewis, do you wish to ask your question?
The question was, it was said that the placing of these units was illegal because they were less than a metre from the wall. I just wondered if there is a law, the citation for it, and are they actually illegal?
Good evening, everybody. I don't think I can answer that one. I think it's something for the planning officers to quote on. Yeah, that would be a planning matter.
Right. Councillor Wheeler, do you want to come in?
There was nothing in planning in that respect in terms of the distances units should be away from a property when you're considering it under planning permission.
Right. Councillor Wheeler?
The glory of Google, having gone on to a site where people sell heat exchange units, their reference to planning permission for ASHPs is, in most cases, installing an air source heat pump is considered small enough of a change to make it permitted development, with the following exceptions. It's got to comply with blah. No other air source heat pump or wind turbine has been installed on the building. Any additional installation requires planning permission. So I appreciate we're reviewing the planning of all of them, presumably within this one planning application, but that is one thing. The outdoor unit size, and then the air source heat pump installed should be a minimum of 1 metre from the boundary. It also says it should be installed at floor level wherever possible. So I think that potentially, as I said, it's metres and at least 1 metre away from the site boundary, not the neighbouring property, but the site boundary. And as per the applicant's statement, it's 0.4 metres from the nearest boundary. It is just 1 metre from the next door neighbour, and that is a next door neighbour's bedroom window. It does also say that they shouldn't be boxed in, that in order to be efficient, etc., they shouldn't be boxed in. And it goes on to say, and bear in mind that this is a seller of air source heat pumps, that they have a reputation for being a bit noisy. Although they're not normally very loud, it might be worth not putting them right next door to your neighbour's wall, and you might want to avoid putting next door to a bedroom. So I have to say, I do feel that on this planning application, the impact that it will have on residential amenity is certainly a consideration that we should be taking and should be considering. And I do think it's important that the officers are absolutely certain before we approve this application that what I'm reading here from a planning law point of view, given this is a company that sells heat source pumps, that says it needs to be a minimum, that we are absolutely 100% factually correct on this, because I know darn sure that if I was the neighbours and we've made a mistake, I would be looking for some form of compensation from the council for that mistake.
Can I just clarify, what is it, your source on that is what?
Thank you, Chair. So, as I said, it is a straight Google. It is to a company that sells air source heat pumps, and it is the considerations that they recommend to people that are looking to buy it. Now, I have to say that if I was a vendor, if it wasn't a very definite recognition point, I probably wouldn't be putting it as a concern when I'm trying to sell that product. So as I'm saying, I appreciate that I'm sure the officers have looked into this, but they need to be absolutely certain. And much as I appreciate deferring the application yet again is not something that any of us want to do, if we are not 100% certain on this, I feel that we should do. That's point number one. And point number two, I have to say I will not be supporting this application. I think on the grounds of residential amenity, we have strong reasons for objection. If we are minded to approve it, could I have clarification, please, on who owns the hedgerows on either side of the property? And I'm sorry, I haven't seen it, and it may well already be there, but could we put a condition, please, that the hedgerows, as hedgerows, must be maintained, and the height must be maintained at a minimum height of 6 metres, unless it is requested to be varied by the neighbours, 6 feet, unless, or whatever minimum height we can get away with in order to stop the impact of people having to look at these hideous things. Thank you.
Carry on. Right. Right, before we go back on to the... Well, I have another question for Mr. Robinson, because we're recommending, interestingly, that these units, which is combined heating units, as far as I'm concerned, it's not an air conditioning unit, it's a combined heating unit, is boxed. That would make the unit protrude further from the property, and that is a noise mitigation, so therefore recognising that must be some noise element. Is that correct, or am I understanding that correctly?
Not sure I understand your question, Councillor. The Chairman, the acoustic enclosure will of course come out further than the existing units do. Now I think we're specifying about 150 mil, so they're going to come out at least that plus plus another amount for ventilation behind. So that 400 is going to reduce by I would think at least half.
Right, and the fact that that recommendation is being made is in recognition, therefore, that these have the potential for noise. Is that correct?
The units unmitigated, well, they can have. It all depends on the maintenance of them. Brand new, they're really quite quiet. If they're well maintained, serviced, they do operate quite efficiently. But mitigation is definitely required, and some sort of boxing.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tapper, I have another question, but Councillor Tapper, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I find myself in the strange position of actually agreeing with Councillor Wheeler on this one. It's questionable whether these units do actually constitute what would be called an air source heat pump. Air source heat pumps, as we understand them, to be installed, as I understand it now, from 2030 in replacement for gas boilers, are for the purposes of basically feeding a central heating system. What we see on the side of the building is clearly not that. The fact that there are multiple ones indicates that it doesn't fulfill what would be normally expected of an air source heat pump, of which normally in any particular property there would only be one to serve the entire property. We have 3 here on one side and 1 on the other side. I believe these are indeed air conditioning systems, and air conditioning systems nowadays of this type are sold specifically not just to cool the property but to heat it in winter as well, but on an individual room by room basis rather than as a central system. So I found a site called quotatis.co.uk, and they published guidance called Planning Permission for Air Conditioning Systems. It says, you can install most air conditioning systems under permitted development rights. This means you won't need to apply to the local authority for planning permission. You can install as many small air conditioning units in one room under these rights. For larger central air conditioning systems, which is where we're now verging onto the area of air source heat pumps, a single air conditioning unit for an entire property, you might need planning permission. This usually depends upon the size and location of the condenser unit. That's the bit on the outside. You don't need planning permission for central air conditioning units as long as the external unit is not installed on a pitched roof. There is no wind turbine on the property. The external unit is not installed within 1 metre of the edge of a flat roof. The volume of the external compressor unit is not more than 0.6 cubic metres. The external unit is more than 1 metre from the boundary of the property. So we keep coming back to this 1 metre from the boundary of the property.
Can you stop? Just go back, wind back a little bit, please. You said it not to be placed on a flat roof or not near a flat roof. Can you just do that flat roof bit again, please?
Certainly, yes. The external unit is not installed within 1 metre of the edge of a flat roof. I don't know what they mean by edge, whether it means the vertical edge or the horizontal edge. But I think the issue here is, are these considered to be small air conditioning units, in which case the developer doesn't even need to apply for permission to install them, or do we consider these to be large central air conditioning systems, in which case there are guidance? I don't think we know the answer to that. And I think until we are provided with the answers to that, the officers have done a proper investigation, we cannot decide this item tonight. And I would propose that we defer to another meeting this particular item until we are given guidance on what exactly these units are and under which regulations they actually fall. I don't know, and I think if we were pushing it through tonight, I would share Councillor Wheeler's concern and would vote against it as it stands at the present moment, because I don't know the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Black.
Just to say, I think I've found the legislation that's being referred to.
Oh, go on. Somebody else read from the internet, please.
It's the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development England Order 2015, I believe.
Sorry, do you want... Sorry to interrupt. If you have a look at condition 3, it does mention the Town and Country Planning Act. It's Schedule 2, Part 14, Class G. That's the one that talks about heating and cooling units and what dimensions or where they're placed, what they need to do to comply with the PD rights. None of that is too relevant when you've got a planning application being considered. So they don't have to comply with the PD rights because we're assessing the planning application. But yeah, it is a Town and Country Planning Act that does talk about what could or couldn't be PD.
I think members need to be mindful, basically, of what's been submitted to date. I mean, obviously, the application's been deferred several times. There's been a site visit by members. Obviously, the plans were incorrect and they came in with amended plans. We've worked hard with the applicant to actually get mitigation for these AC units, which have been, which form part of this application. And also, they have been accompanied with a noise acoustic report, which has been assessed by the council. Within the report itself, we have assessed it, and we have raised no objection to this acoustic report. If members are minded to refuse the application on those grounds, they have to be of a robust reason and actually provide reasons why we're refusing it in terms of means the impact. Because we've got a noise acoustic report which has been assessed by our own council officers, and we've raised no objection to this application on this grounds.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Can I just leave the... I consider them to be combined heating units, heating cooling units. I've seen these in office buildings, and you normally put them on the roof well away from any activity that goes on. There is another issue, there are a number of issues that I picked up in the course of this. One is the front elevations, where in the report they've been constructed at 0.6 of a metre, larger than the original permission. That's one point. And the other point was the, and notice this on site, was the difference in levels and the flooding, or the water runoff from number 1 to the front garden of number 3. Which is still to be dealt with, and that is an outstanding matter, as I understand it. Is that correct?
So I have asked the applicant to confirm more about what they've got in place. They've got soakaways within the front garden, and they've got drainage channels at the edge where the footpath runs down towards the hedge at the front of the site and the hedge which is between the two properties, between number 1 and number 3. What is happening is it is also coming off the side of that footpath. So the applicant has said that they're willing to construct another small wall to stop that runoff. That was decided when building control visited the site. So it's more of a building control issue, it's more of a civil issue, it's not so much of a planning issue. They've got drainage on site, they've got the channels on site, they've said that the level of runoff will go down now construction is stopped. Do you want
I was just going to add, Chair, that obviously, again, officers have worked hard with the applicant to come up with some mitigation in regards to the drainage issue, and that will be sorted out once the actual application has been completed on site.
Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go back to the point I was making earlier regarding the location of one of the, and I'm going to refer to them as air conditioning units because that's actually what the plan is referring to them as. They're not referred to as heat source pumps, they're referred to as AC units on the plan. So that again raises a different question to me. But this So the first one on the west elevation is clearly designed purely for the garage. And I don't understand how much garage requires an air conditioning unit or a heating unit. Most people don't spend much time in their garages. However, because if you compare them to the other two on the western elevation, they are associated with tubing and plumbing work, I'm using for want of a better word, which is going to other rooms throughout the house. So it raises a concern to me regarding what that is actually for. And so I would actually like a condition added preventing the use of the garage being converted to a residential living space, because if that, to me, that is showing that their intention is to convert that space to a living space. I would like that, if that can be added. I also, like others, raised the concerns regarding these units. I think they are overbearing on residential amenity. I think they go against the guidance which multiple members have already raised, which is the 1 metre boundary rule. I don't know, whatever that is required, I think it's a common courtesy, really, not to place noisy machines right next to your neighbour's boundaries, let alone right next to a living space. So that would be a definite impact on residential amenity. And if the noise impact report was taken at the back of the property, how will that absolutely adequately measure the noise impact when the noise pollutants are at the side of the property? So I would actually question the efficacy of that report as well. But if I wanted to raise the point of the condition, and if officers can respond to that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Councillor Perry.
Can I just ask planning officers, if this application came forward as now, as is, would you pass it today? It seems to me that this is sort of evolved over a number of cumulative applications over the years, and are we being asked to approve it because we've sort of got to live with the history that's been built up? Or what is the situation? If that came today, built to that size on that plot, would you approve it?
As the officers have explained in the report, we've got the extant permission, which is the starting point, and that's what's already been approved, so we need to make the comparison with the extant permission. However, as officers, we have to look at the totality of the bill before us as well and make that assessment still on visual amenity grounds and residential amenity grounds as to whether or not we believe it's having an adverse impact. And as officers, that's the conclusion we've come to.
Councillor Allaway.
Thank you, Chair. I think the damage has been done with a lot of the visual amenity issues. So the extra heights on these dormers, I think, are probably hard to argue against. But these air conditioning units, the visual amenity, and the potential noise impact there, for me, that should be changed. So I won't be supporting that as it is with those units that high on the wall in that location.
Right, thank you for that. James, would you like to comment on the noise impact on the adjoining residents from the various units, because there's more than one unit, and the various units that are on that flank wall?
Yes, thank you. I can. I've looked at the noise report in some detail, and I've also carried out my own calculations using the data supplied by the manufacturers. And in the noise report by Nova, it does include some technical specifications of these, and although they're very difficult to read because it's such small print, they do refer to air conditioning units rather than heat pumps, so perhaps that clears that up. The three on the western elevation, close to number 3, do have the potential to cause some adverse impact to Mr. Craig and his family. and that's the reason why the mitigation providing about 13 dB was required. I did note his comments about the effect on the ground floor bedroom, and I have worked out that from all three units at the front window there should be around about a 29 dB sound level, which is common practice to allow 15 dB for an open window, brings it to 14 dB, which is well within the limit permitted for sleeping, which is 30. So with the mitigation, I'm confident in saying that ground floor bedroom should suffer a very low impact. As regards the rear elevation, the southern elevation, the distance to 21 azalea ways is somewhere around 33 metres, and the attenuation over that distance will bring the level in their garden to around about 16 to 20 dB, well below background. And the same is the same case applies for number 56, where the air conditioning unit at the distance will lead to a level around about 29 dB at the facade. Again, allowing 15 dB for a partially open window, that makes that well compliant with any rules and regulations within. So the same is for 54 over the road, 54 middle way, and 25. The distance is such that there's not going to be any impact or very low impact from these levels. So in conclusion, then if the units are as installed as specified, and the attenuation by mitigation by way of the acoustic louvers and boxing is installed correctly, I have every confidence that the impact will be very low. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Rice.
Could I just ask officers, during the entire time this application has been in consideration, has the applicant been asked to move these units to ground level, and what was their response?
To ground level, no. The units haven't been part of the application for as long as the application's been submitted. It has been evolving, it's been said. We did speak about moving them to the rear elevation, and their answer was to get the noise survey in, to assess them, and then to do the mitigation works to it.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson referred to the windows at the front of the building and the noise that's affected by it. I may be going completely insane at this point, but my understanding is that there is a small window directly adjacent so as you're looking at number 3, my understanding is that there is a small window to the left-hand side of the extension. Yeah. So no, I don't. I mean that there is another window at the side of that property. No. Are we?
This side here is the side. There isn't a window on that side elevation.
So that's number 3's elevation, and that's the ground floor part of the elevation.
Yeah.
I thought there was a small window there, so I'm obviously not.
Sorry.
No. I think that's the neighbour's wall, not the building. I believe that
It's one and the same thing.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if it's worth checking. I'm sure he said that his mother-in-law's window was right.
We've gone round this. Sorry, Councillor Gordon.
On the drawing labelled Western Side Elevation as built, it shows here the new acoustic enclosure to existing AC units. Are they currently been built yet, or are they to be built? So it shows the actual noise baffling on the units. That drawing there, yeah.
They're still proposed. The casing is still proposed.
So, one more question. So, we have the same units at work, and while the noise isn't loud, it's a constant droning noise, so it does provide irritation. It's a low-level humming that happens all the time. So, in my garden at work, the noise, rather the same as the back wall there, so it's not loud. So the decibel is quite correct, as the expert said, but it's more the tone and pitch of the noise. It's a low-level hum that's constantly irritating all the time. So that's what you're against. If you live next door to one of those units there, it's going to be quite irritating, from my experience of having one at work.
Councillor Lewis?
No, thank you. Just point out that Mr. Robinson did say that these units have the potential to get noisy as they get older. So, you know, these levels are taken with a brand new piece of equipment. So.
Councillor Rise?
I'm just wondering if Mr. Robinson can just expand on Councillor Gordon's comments there regarding, no, because I want to know if the noise level with the mitigation that Mr. Robinson has said, is that a one-off noise, which is acceptable? But if there is a constant noise of 14 decibels, constant, does that affect the noise pollution concerns?
Yeah, perhaps I can answer that in that when you know the acoustics, when you do one of these assessments, you do apply a penalty to the noise to take account of tonality and intermittency and the sort of intrusive element that some of these droning, if you like, for want of a better word, can create. So it has been accounted for. 14 dB would be inaudible. So the level in a bed, just put it in context, 11 in a bedroom at night, trying to get to sleep would be anywhere between sort of 18 and 20 dB.
The question I'm going to ask is, are you now saying that they will not hear a single sound, because you're saying it's inaudible to me, which means you cannot hear it, that in that extension on which is adjoining, they will not hear a constant low humming drone?
You're muted, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, at that level you would not hear it.
Sorry, Mr. Craig, I can't let you in. I'm sorry, but you know, it's right. Councillor White.
Are we talking about the noise from just one of the units or all three together? So if it was 14 decibels from one unit, if all three were going, would that be whatever 3 times 14 is?
Mr. Robinson, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I calculated it on all three operating at the same time.
Right, okay. We've been round this. I think we have an officer recommendation, but the committee have raised a number of points. I think Councillor Allaway's point is a fair one, that we've a number of iterations on this and we've got to where we're at, whether we like it or not. Councillor Wheeler, the screening to the front elevation and the side elevation. Well, certainly it's the front and the side elevation. And I think the garage, about the use of the garage, and my concern is that there's further works, the potential for further works on the elevation with that hole right up on the top eaves, which was not able to be answered. I also have concerns over the drainage mitigation. I hear what the officers are saying, but I also feel that you know, the noise. We have to make, as a committee, we have to make a measured judgment in, based on the advice we get from our officers, and the officers are saying that the noise is not going to be intrusive, my understanding of it. But, however, there is the visual impact of the units as they exist now, and with the enclosure, shall I call it, that visual impact is going to be increased. And that is not just at the side of the house, it is overlooking the garden of number 3, and vice versa, and the occupiers of the garden number 3 will have no choice but to look at these units. I'm struggling on this one. If we refuse this, if the committee refuse it, we need to have, as we've been told, some firm, solid planning reasons for its refusal. Visual impact is certainly the one that I would come up with, but I think I will put this to the vote and to see where the committee is going. But if you do refuse it, we do need to have some firm planning reasons. So first and foremost, we have an officer recommendation. Is there a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation? Right. There is nobody. We therefore need Councillor Perry.
I just asked a question. Would it be possible to grant with the condition that they do not put any of those air conditioning units on the side?
We
That seems
have
be
to
the main
opine.
point of contention.
We have to decide on what is in front of us. We can't say we would have done this if something else was done. We'd be here all night on every application, I think, if we did that. We cannot do that. Very fair point has been put by Mr. Scott. Right, there's nobody here who wishes to recommend acceptance. We have some further questions, and it has been floated at different times. Maybe that this is deferred again. Is there any appetite within the committee for a further deferral for investigations on the outline? And I'll come back on my list. The areas that I have written down are drainage mitigation, screening, use of the garage, further units on that elevation. Those are the 4 points I've got here. Councillor Wheeler? Sorry, Graham, I'll come back to you.
With respect, I don't think we can really consider something based on supposition. The applicant has told us that they are intending to use the garage as a garage. The fact that the car, certainly last time we visit, would have to be able to jump up to get into the garage is obviously is not something we can consider, because they have made a statement to say that they are going to be using it as a garage. We could condition any other use. We could say that if it was to be used for anything else other than storage and as a garage, it would need to come back to planning. But I mean, I'm looking for guidance, obviously, but I don't think that we can investigate something when we've been given a statement. The same with the 2 big holes in the side of the building. They're saying there's going to be no more residential amenity space up there. So again, we could condition it to say that they would have to come back, but we can't defer on the basis of that, because they've categorically told us that that's not what they're going to do. Certainly I would like to put forward a proposal that we refuse the application on the grounds of residential amenity, that we do raise, although it's not a reason for refusal, that good practice of absolutely everything you read from the manufacturers about the installation of these units is that they should be in a clear and open space, ideally not in an alleyway. I take on board the fact that we have put in mitigation factors to enclose the units. there is a vibration element, which I don't think we've talked about brackets in those enclosures. So again, in terms of residential amenity, we've not offset that as an offering. But certainly my feeling at this stage is that it will have a negative impact on residential amenity, much as I am really grateful for the officers to work so hard with the applicant to try and get the mitigation in this application. I don't feel it goes far enough, and I do think it will be harmful to residential immunity. I think we can add in additional drainage concerns because they've been raised on a site visit and they've been accepted that mitigation could be introduced, but they're not within this application. I can see the officers sharpening their pencils to the left-hand side, telling me, no doubt, that if should this go to appeal, we've got very narrow grounds and we may not win it. But I think at times, as I have previously said, things have gone to appeal that we've overturned in this committee and they have been upheld. I don't think there's anyone in this chamber that doesn't have concerns about it.
In terms of the visual aspects that Councillor Hawkins has already raised, that's obviously reasonable grounds if the committee feels so to refuse on those grounds. With respect to the residential amenity issues and the impact of noise, you have to have regard to the technical expertise and the evidence that you've been given. We don't have any technical expertise or evidence to the contrary. So if this did go to appeal, that would be something that would have to be taken into account. And if there was no evidence to the contrary, then such a reason for refusal would be extremely hard to defend. In respect of similarly the drainage issue, we've already explained that that's not a planning matter that we can refuse on, and Building Control gave the advice to the applicant with respect to the civil issues, and that's what officers' opinion is on that issue as well. In terms of, however, the good practice or what the general permitted development order says about air source heat pumps or air conditioning units, we can certainly make reference as an informative to what the standards or the requirements are under permitted development. But the reason it's come before you in terms of those units is because they need permission. And that's why we just considered the individual merits of those particular units. So in short, in my opinion as an officer, visually, yes, in terms of a reason for refusal, that is something that can be defended. But you have to be very careful when you go down a line of issues over noise and the issues on residential amenity when there isn't any evidential report or equivalent to back that up. Thank you.
So, just a second, Councillor Wheeler. So, visual impact, ergo, impacts on the residential, impacts on the amenity of the adjoining occupier. Because, rightly or wrongly, I'm linking those two together. The actual impact of these units is having a detrimental impact, again, on the amenity of the occupier of number 3.
Yeah, I mean, if that's an assessment on the visual harm of those units, on the amenities of number 3, then that's a reasonable ground for members.
Councillor Whitcroft.
Just an observation, really. We've obviously heard from Mr. Partington in terms of the reasons for appeal and being the visual. How many reasons, and obviously I appreciate that the more planning reasons, the better, but I'm also mindful of this fear of appeals. And I think that that's something that historically we've taken on board when perhaps we shouldn't, because I do agree with Councillor Wheeler when she says that basically the fear of appeal is not the way we should be going. We should be going with what we think is right, not whether or not how successful or not an appeal may be. So how many grounds do we actually need?
With respect to an appeal, you could just have one reason for refusal.
So if we've got the visual, then surely that's, as I say, whilst we're trying to find as many as possible, surely that's enough. Correct.
Yeah, I will come in. Under the legislation and case law, this is our opportunity to, we have to agree now pretty well the reasons we can't come back and revisit this to say, and that's why I was trying to narrow or pin down, if you like, it's an unfair expression in the officers, but to get a handle on the, can we use that sort of the amenity impact? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins.
Sorry, just a sec.
I have had the opportunity to look at other appeals that have been won and lost. It would appear that it will be difficult to fight it on noise on the basis of the fact that noise can be mitigated, and there is case law on an appeal decision that related to this. So noise is going to be a tricky one, although having said that, I have to say in this case it was in a slightly more built-up area, and the impact of noise is very much on the change of noise and the impact of that change of noise. So we haven't got an ambient background noise in that particular location. So any noise is therefore likely to have a greater impact. But one of the things that they do say and was accepted by the appeal, the person hearing the appeal in this case, is that the units they're citing, their materials were not sympathetic, in this case to the host dwelling. Well, the host dwelling is what they've created, but it does talk about the surrounding area and the impact on the surrounding area. So it would appear that historically there is something that has been appealed and has been won on those grounds. I think there is a particular character area, isn't there, that is associated with Copt Hall. It's not, because it's not my ward, I have to confess I'm not as completely familiar with it as I might otherwise be. But going back to the points made by the officers, if we only have one very strong reason, we can put in an informative about noise. That isn't our reason for refusing. We can put in an informative about the fact that the installation of these units does not appear to comply with best whatever it is, guidance, best practice guidance on the installation of those units as an informative. But we can definitely, it would appear, it can be sustained and can be upheld that a refusal on appearance grounds.
So as far as Copt Hall, it is a character area, and it's been put to me by a number of people that the actual building itself goes against the character, because most of Copt Hall was self-built, or a large part of the early part was self-built. Mr. Chinner, you have a suggestion for us to help us out here? Do you?
Thank you, Chair. I think just to echo John Partington's comments in regards to noise and amenity, I think we shouldn't go down that route, given we've got specialists on board, got specialist documents been submitted, been assessed based on noise. But in terms of character and design, I put this to the members of the planning committee, and I've heard what they've said in terms of the visual impact and the impact it's going to have to the street scene, the impact to the neighbours as well. So as a suggestion, I put this forward as a reason for refusal for discussion. So the wording is as follows. Due to the increased height of the front gables, the structures are not subservient to the host dwelling. These gables are prominent in the street scene, and when combined with existing extensions result in a dwelling which is incongruous in the local area. Furthermore, the installation of 4 heating and cooling units would harm the visual amenity of the surrounding area, as this results in cluttered in industrial appearance in an otherwise residential area. As such, the development does not comply with national planning policy and policy DM9 of the core strategy, and also the guiding principles, of 10.1, 10.3 and 10.5. Thank you, Chair.
I was just about to say that, actually, yes. Thank you. The only point that I would, thank you for that, is I accepted the residential amenity, but the visual impact of these units to the adjoining occupier. With that, I mean, very happy to accept those if the rest of the committee are. Members, we have reasons for refusal. I am prepared to recommend reasons for refusal, and Councillor Wheeler second that. Members, all those that are eligible to vote, and that excludes Councillors Whitcroft, Morley and Black. Are you in agreement with that recommendation to refuse? Thank you, members. That is unanimous of those areas to vote. So the recommendation is refused on the grounds as given. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. And thank you, officers, for a detailed investigation. And thank you, Ms. Kimber. We'll move to item number 4. We're still on the main agenda. On page 83, 9 Christie Close, Lightwater. On a declaration, I will make one for some of us, not all the councillors, but some of us, that the applicant is the daughter of a former councillor at this, Heath Borough councillor. And that would apply to the Councillor White, myself, Councillor Perry, Councillor Morley. I think that covers it. And Councillor Wheeler, of course it is. I do beg your pardon. Are there any declarations to make on this one? No. Thank you, Mr. Ricci.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This planning application would normally be determined under the Council's scheme of delegation, as the Chair mentioned. However, it's being presented at Planning Committee as the applicant is related to former Councillor Gandham. The application site, which you can see here outlined in red, is number 9 Christie Close in Lightwater. The property is a 2-storey end-of-terrace dwelling with an attached garage, which is here, and this garage is actually accessed from the rear in here. The proposal seeks to erect a part single, part 2-storey side and rear extension, which is shown in here, and this is following demolition of the existing garage. A strip of amenity land along this area here would be converted into residential curtilage, so to accommodate the proposed development. These are the existing elevations, so this is the front view, and this is the rear elevation showing the entrance to the garage. These are the proposed elevations. So here is where the 2-storey side element of the proposal would be located. And so this is the front elevation. And here, this is the rear elevation. And again, you can see that that proposal would comprise also a garage in a similar arrangement to the existing. For completeness, these are the proposed floor plans. This photograph on the left-hand side shows you the dwelling's front elevation. And again, this is where the 2-storey extension would be located. This is a view of the rear of the property, and these are the gates which grant the vehicular access to the garage, which is here. Here you can see the proposed side elevation, so that's the side view as seen from the road. And this is the area of amenity that would be converted into residential use. As set out in the report, the proposal is considered acceptable in terms of its impact on the character of the area. And in this regard, it's noted that a planning application was recently granted at number 7 to the south to also change the use of a piece of amenity land to residential garden. No objections are raised in terms of residential amenity and highways. It's therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed in page 87 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was thinking that looked familiar, and I think it's because it's the previous application we had on the amenity land, wasn't it? Members. Councillor Rise.
Just one question, and I'm not sure, and I do apologise if it was included. Can you just confirm that the extension will use the same materials as the existing building?
Yes, it will. So if you go on to page 88, which is not 87, so yes, it will be constructed in external materials to match the existing building, and that's required by condition.
It's a good point, all the same. Yeah, thank you. Members, anybody, any other comments? If not, we have an officer recommendation. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Rise, Councillor Whitcroft, all those in agreement? Members, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. On to the next item. Clear Spring is on page 99 on our agenda. Now, we'll remember that this was deferred from the last meeting for one item, and one item only, I say. I'm going to stick to this one as well. Are there any declarations to make on this item? No. Mr. Issio, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the planning application at Clear Spring Brick Hill is for a single-storey rear extension and loft conversion, which members may recall seeing here, seeing being presented in a meeting that took place last month. The application was deferred so that it could be investigated if the property's permitted development rights remained intact, and it can be confirmed that that is the case. The application site is here, outlined in red. The property is a semi-detached dwelling and is located in the green belt. The proposed extension would be located here. The proposed floor plans are shown in this slide. The proposal would extend across the full width of the existing dwelling. It would have a monopitched roof, and it would measure 4.5 meters in depth with a maximum height of 3 meters. You will see from this plan that the applicant also seeks to convert the loft space into living accommodation, and the external alterations associated with this would be limited to inserting 2 roof lights to the rear. This element of the proposal would constitute permitted development. Here you can see the proposed elevation. So this is the extension, and these are the roof lights. These photographs show you the front and the rear of the application site. And again, this is another view of the application site. So here, this is actually the attached dwelling, and this is where the proposed extension would be located. As detailed in paragraph 7.3.4 of the officer's report, in combination with the previous extensions, the proposal would be considered a disproportionate addition to the original dwelling, and therefore inappropriate development in the greenbelt. However, its harm to openness would be limited, as it would actually sit against the existing dwelling. The NPPF sets out that inappropriate development in a greenbelt should not be approved unless there are very special circumstances which would outweigh the development's harm to the greenbelt. In this case, the property's permitted development rights remain intact, and implementing these rights would likely cause greater harm to the openness of the greenbelt than the current proposal. As set out in this report, there's an opportunity to remove these rights, including the right to erect outbuildings. This is therefore considered to amount to very special circumstances that would outweigh the proposal's harm to the greenbelt. The proposal would further be acceptable in terms of its impact on the character of the area and residential amenity. On this basis, it is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions detailed on page 103 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members. Sorry, Councillor Wheeler, you were saying what?
So I'm not sure if anybody who is there, any of the other councillors that are there want to talk.
Oh, right. Holding. Mr. Scott, does anybody viewing want to... Councillor Tedder, you wanting to speak, perchance?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I am here. No, I chose not to speak because they're a very near neighbour, and it could be, and I know the area very well, and although I totally disagree with this because of the amount of extensions on that property, and I could go on forever, but as I say, I chose not to speak because of the area in general and the closeness of us as neighbours.
Thank you for that. Sorry if I embarrassed you.
No, I was sitting here.
I was being prompted. Yes, speak to your fellow ward councillor about that later. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I suppose really what I'd like to do is just come in on various other appeal decisions that have come forward within this area. So for those committee members that aren't familiar with it, Brick Hill is an undeveloped, very scattered group of historically very small cottages which are located within Chobham Common. So it's green belt, but it's green belt within the special protection area. Basically, it is surrounded by green belt, by common land. It is located within the common land. This application ceases. I appreciate that it's an extension into the roof, but we are actually going to end up with a 3-storey dwelling, which will be very dominant in relation to the other properties that are in the area. And although I appreciate, before there's a tweet in my left-hand side, that every planning application must be considered on its own merits, historically, planning applications in this area have been refused, and they've continued to be approved when appealed on the basis of the fact that it is greenbelt and it's seen to be harmful to the greenbelt. The cottage was tiny. It has already been increased extensively, and I'm afraid the effectiveness on the openness of the greenbelt for me isn't overcome, even though under permitted development rights they could build more. To go up a storey and to have windows, they would still need, I would assume, to have to come back for planning, because it would have an overbearing nature on the neighbours if you were putting in windows in the roof. Can I just confirm, are they increasing the height of the roof, or are they building within the current roof line?
They would be building within the current roof line, so it's internal works. So they're extending single-storey rear extension, and the works associated with the loft conversion are exactly that, just converting what they have in there.
Thank you, Patricia. I won't go through the conclusion of Inspector Bale's report, and it does relate to a planning application that we refused previously within this area. I just can't support it. It's enormous. It's completely out of keeping within the street scene, if you can call it a street scene, in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I quite appreciate your views, but this was an issue that was, it hinged, or the debate hinged on the whether permitted rights existed, and they didn't, or they did or they didn't exist, and the officer's report, and we left it outstanding on that one item, and the officer's report is quite clear on those items. Therefore, there is an officer recommendation to grant in accordance with the report, and then you have the amended condition 4 as contained in the update. Is there a proposer and a seconder for that item? Councillor Tapper, Councillor Rise, all those in agreement with the officer recommendation as amended?
Voting in favour of the officer recommendation, Councillors Alloway, Barnett, Rise, Black, Gordon, Lewis, Morley, Perry, Ratteram, Tapper, Whitcroft, White and Hawkins.
You got Tapper?
Oh, I
Yeah,
think it, yeah.
And myself.
Yeah.
Against? Councillor Wheeler.
Against Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, members. That is carried. That is the end of the agenda. I have 3 or 4 bits of housekeeping, which I'd like to discuss. Do you want to? We'll come off YouTube.
Whilst I do that, members, can you confirm that you're happy for the papers on item 4 to remain exempt?
Yes, we are. Yes, sorry, I didn't do that on that bit.
No,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah, thank you.